Querete opantes emi anepsios Leonides, so cousin Leonid, and I'm here with another discussion about Koine Greek. So let's get straight into it. So we're doing a similar kind of verse to what we've done before, and many of you, particularly churchgoers, will know this verse already or know it in translation. So without further ado, let's have a look at it. Okay, so you already know very well that the channel that I have is kind of no frills, so I don't have animated or 3D introductions or anything of that kind. Most you'll catch me kind of whistling Schumann's, Schubert's The Trout. Okay, but none of that today. So uh, I've decided that instead of recycling the same background from a PowerPoint or the equivalent, I'm going to use a picture of just some random river. So let's have a look at that. Now let's go through this. So I'm going to imagine that you can't actually see the mouse as I'm putting it down, but we'll just read it first and then we'll see. So we got ekusate hoti erete ke agapeses ton plesion su kaimeses ton echron su. Okay, let's go through that. So the uh, I won't actually go through the translation straight away. We'll actually talk about it first. This is similar to something we've already done. There are a couple of times where this is actually mentioned, and if you look in a Greek copy of the New Testament, then at least mine does anyway, but yours might have the words that he's quoting as being in bold font. Okay, so this is something that's particularly seen in the Gospel of Matthew. It's seen in the other synoptic Gospels to some extent, but to a lesser extent in John, that they're often quoting parts of the Old Testament. Okay, and this is no kind of exception. Okay, that's signaled here in the punctuation in the English, so let's go through that. Okay, so don't be confused about having the two capital letters there. So the capital Eta and the capital Alpha for agapeses. Okay, is not really that confusing. So often they still tend to actually put a capital letter at the beginning of a sentence, at the beginning of a section, and the bit that they're quoting is here going to be in a capital letter as well. So we haven't got a full stop, so it's not the beginning of a sentence, it's not the beginning of a section or anything like that, but it's the beginning of at least the translation of whatever they're quoting. We're going to find this is actually quoting something that was in the book of Leviticus. Okay, let's have a look. And we've got a very similar structure to what we've got before. So we get ekusate. So we can say that's aorist. It's not a command. Okay, this is going to be an aorist, you did something. And it's going to be you plural did something. So modern English doesn't have any difference between you singular and you plural. They're both you. But let's say that in Old English and in Middle English you had the difference between thee and you. And you actually still have that difference in a number of languages, and still with basically the same consonants beginning it. Okay, so let's have a look. So we got you heard. Now the translation that's often given in a Bible that you'll find at church is you have heard. So the expectation is that the audience, so this is Jesus speaking, okay, that the audience has heard what's going on. So this is actually reasonably complicated. So you heard that hoti. So difference between, or a difference between Greek and Latin is that there are a couple of ways of actually doing the indirect statement in Greek, and one of them is using hoti. In Latin, it's generally using the accusative and the infinitive, or less commonly the nominative and the infinitive, if you have a passive verb of saying. Okay, so here we're ignoring an accusative, we're ignoring the infinitive, So we got you heard that it was said, erethe. That's going to be an aorist passive. And we might do a video that is just talking about the aorist passive. Okay, so let's have a look. We got the agapeses. This is exactly the same structure as we had in a verse we've looked at before. We've got a future tense. So it literally means you will love. But if we put it together, there is a reason why it's in this. So the thing that it's quoting is in fact a command. So either an imperative or more likely a present subjunctive used as a command. Okay, but we've got a future here. Now there is a reason for that, which we'll talk about in a moment. So let's have a look at this. So we've got agapeses, you will love, ton plesion, su. Okay, that su is going to be genitive. So it's going to be basically of you. Okay, so the ton plesion, we know got the definite article, so it should mean the something of you. So we translate it generally as your neighbor. Okay, kai miseses, and you will hate, so it's going to be the opposite. Now, Greek, unlike English, and to a lesser extent, unlike Latin, has a lot of different words for to love, and they have different connotations. And the word that was kind of adopted by Koine Greek, Christians using Koine Greek, and also Hellenistic Jews, is agape, meaning just kind of the love of God towards human beings, but also this idea that it's the kind of love that human beings should show to each other. So this is not the same as kind of soppy romantic love. It's not even the love within a family, so that's something like phileo or something. This is a very specific context of love, and it's one of the myths. I assume that they're mostly myths, but it's one of the myths that's spread about the early Christian community, that they had so-called love feasts. So this idea of you're given the bread or the wine, and then it's kind of commanding when you're given it to love one another. And there are kind of myths that turn up in the first century and even the second century, that the Christian communion, the Eucharist, is basically some kind of sexual free-for-all, which it's not. Okay, or as I say, we've got no evidence that it ever was, but it's a kind of thing that people possibly heard third or fourth hand what was going on, and they assumed the worst, as people often do, not only about Christianity but basically about anything. Okay, so we got agapeses, so you will love your neighbor, and you will meseses, we can see that that's another future. Okay, you will hate, okay, your enemy. Okay, and we can take this as being generally the advice that Jesus is not going to actually give to people. So we've heard that thing about love your neighbor as yourself, okay, which originally actually comes from part of Leviticus. It's presumably actually quoting that. So we've got you heard, or you have heard. It's literally you heard, but you have heard, if we want to keep that kind of perfect idea, that it was said. Okay, so again, this is the idea of people's interpretations. That's what we got. You have heard that it was said. Okay. Okay. Love your neighbor and hate your enemy. So the reason that this is future is because it's indirect speech in indirect speech, but it's a direct quote. So it has to change to show that it's in indirect speech. And so, as we said, the original form was probably present subjunctive. To a lesser extent, it could be imperative. And the way it's changed into indirect, a clause within indirect speech, is that they change the imperative or the subjunctive into the future as I say, I think it's going to be the subjunctive. All right, so we might call an end there. We'll just repeat that. So you have heard, ekusate, hoti, that. Okay, it was said, erete. Okay, agape says. So love, ton plesion, your neighbor. That's the su, that's the your. And miseses, hate your enemy. Okay, and presumably then Jesus is going to say something else, and we might go on with that verse next time. Okay, so we'll call it an end there. If you have any questions, please leave a note in the comments. If you're thinking about sponsoring this channel, then don't just give a donation to your favorite charity, and there's no need to tell myself or anyone about that. And I will talk to you next time. So, okay, harete.